Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the third session in SunoikisisDC Digital Classics Spring 2024. This semester, we're focusing on digital approaches to cultural heritage. And we have a really exciting session today, a really full session as well today. There'll be lots and lots of content. If you haven't already seen the session page for this session, there's a link to it in the text beneath this video, if you're finding this via YouTube. If you're joining us live, please use the chat to the right of the screen to say hi. Let us know where you're watching from. That'd be great. You can also use the chat to ask questions, make comments during the session, and we'll come to them at the end of the session, and we'll also invite you to join some discussion with us then. So yeah, we really look forward to hearing from you. If you're watching this asynchronously, that is to say, any time in the future, we're also delighted to have you here. Welcome, but unfortunately, you can't join the live discussion through that. So without further ado, I'll introduce my two collaborators this week. These are two of the people who I've had the most pleasure in collaborating with for many years now. So two absolutely brilliant scholars, Dr. Chiara Palladino, who will speak first, who is Assistant Professor of Classics at the Furman University in South Carolina, and Dr. Valeria Vitale, who will speak second, who is a lecturer in digital humanities at the University of Sheffield in the UK. Both have done excellent and groundbreaking work in the area of gazetteers and annotation of geographic data, as well as many other things. And you'll be hearing from them. Well, immediately. In fact, I think I'll hand you over to Chiara in the first instance right away.
Thank you, Gabby. All right. Well, welcome everybody. For those of you who are joining us live, and for those of you who are going to watch this afterwards. My name is Chiara Palladino, and I will tackle the first half of this lecture, roughly, to sort of get the ground of what we mean by gazetteers, digital gazetteers, and some of the things that we can do with them. And then Valeria is going to talk about the applications and the potential of gazetteers a little bit more in the domain of digital classics in particular. So we're going to cover a little bit of a definition of gazetteers, what kinds of things we have in terms of gazetteers for the ancient and the pre-modern world. We're going to show some test cases, geo-annotation with Recogito in particular, using gazetteers to make sense of ancient texts. And then Valeria is going to talk about the exciting project, machine reading maps, and finding attestations of places across images, actually. And then she's also going to introduce the exercise of the variants of the exercises that we have thought about for this particular session. So let's start by defining gazetteers. A gazetteer in general, both digital and printed, is something that people are generally familiar with. It's essentially an index or a directory of geographical elements or locations, and generally we find them in conjunction with an atlas, with a map. So they have a specific sort of geographical background. And the one that you see on the right is probably one of the most famous gazetteers of atlases for the Greek and Roman world, the Barrington Atlas, which was one of the first pioneering efforts to publish spatial information about the ancient Greek-Roman world with accompanying GIS resources. And later on, a few years later, actually, the Barrington Atlas itself gave way to probably the first digitized gazetteer of the ancient world, Pleiades. And in that sense, digital gazetteers or digitized or born digital versions of geographical gazetteers are essentially covering sort of the same purpose, but they are so much more. They do provide an authoritative list, an authoritative index of geographical names and locations and places, in our case about the ancient Greco-Roman world, but even about the ancient world in general. And they can be used in conjunction with, mapping tools and GIS tools, but they are very important to digital mapping and digital spatial projects because of their nature as authoritative references. And the way that they do that in the digital world is by associating each entry, each element that represents a place or a location in the gazetteer with a unique and stable identifier, which ensures disambiguation and identification of that particular name or that particular place. Pleiades is probably the biggest gazetteer about the ancient world. By all means, it's not the only one. We're going to see a few of them. And Pleiades in particular was created from the initial bulk of data of the Barrington Atlas, but it has recently expanded considerably beyond that. And it is also a community-built and community-maintained gazetteer where contributors may access the database, modify entries, add new ones, and so on and so forth. Also, gazetteers in the world of digital antiquity and digital classics have also contributed to a new way of conceiving ancient places in the digital space. Generally, in GIS and in mapping, we think about places as coordinates or samples of coordinates, but we all know that in classics and in antiquity in general, this is not always a granted association. And Pleiades considers rather places as bundles of features, essentially. So cultural, chronological, toponomastic features rather than just locations. So a place broadly understood is not necessarily just latitude and longitude, because this is a very kind of problematic identification for us in particular. So what are gazetteers for? Gazetteers are for many things, really. You can do all sorts of things with gazetteers in the digital world. One of the most fundamental tools or resources that they provide is, as I was saying, stable identifiers in the form of URIs. And URIs are extremely important in the digital world because they help us reconcile and disambiguate place records. So, for example, a place name can be attested in many different languages, for instance, modern languages, ancient languages, and so on. It can change name according to the particular time span of its attestation. Think about, I don't know, Istanbul and Byzantium and Constantinople, and so on and so forth. Or think about London, which can be translated as Londra in Italian, and so on. So by means of associating all of those instances of name to the same URI, we have a way of essentially saying, look, even though the name is different, this is actually the same place. And so this is the same gazetteer record. And this is tremendously useful in any scenario of digital mapping or generally digital manipulation of spatial data. They can also help us distinguish and disambiguate between places that maybe have the same name, but have different locations and that are actually not the same place. So using distinct URIs to refer to the same place name helps us understand that actually those are two different things. They have different sets of coordinates, they have a different location, a different history, and they are essentially two completely different gazetteer entries. So what are URIs? URIs are very, very important for digital research because machines need a way to disambiguate and identify things in a very stable way. So they are essentially an unambiguous way of talking about ancient places in the digital space. Typically, URIs are numerical strings, and they are unambiguously and uniformly attached to an individual entry in a gazetteer. So they're meant to say that even if an entity has the same name, has many names, many different names, or different characteristics, and so on, they can be unambiguously identified. So, for example, in Pleiades, we have like a generic entry such as Alexandria. And if we type the name Alexandria in the search engine for Pleiades, you will see that there are so many different Alexandrias, of course. The one that maybe we want, or the one that maybe we search at that point, for instance, Alexandria in Egypt, will be associated to one very specific numerical string, the URI, which essentially looks this way. And in Pleiades, the URI is placed at the very end of the URL for the specific gazetteer entry. But in general, gazetteers are more than just simple lists, right? And because they serve as authorities, they are fundamental in helping disambiguating and reconciling, but they also provide so much more information about places, which is accessible through the mechanism of the URIs. So they help us improve metadata about places. They help us exchange information across projects. Projects that make use of the same URI can have access to the same resources and to the same information, and they can also exchange data between themselves. They also help us recording and storing and organizing information about places in the ancient world, which is particularly crucial for places or records that are in danger. And this is very important, as you can imagine, for cultural heritage. They provide, through the URIs, a linking mechanism through linked open data technologies. And in general, they just help us formalize our knowledge about places in the ancient world, and even beyond, of course, through time and space. So they make our idea of a place a lot more sophisticated, essentially. They give us this general sense that a place is like a notion that has a depth, right? A historical and a literary depth. It can be associated with names, but also with locations and relations and attestations and so on. So the most important gazetteers out there will not just provide, an entry with a place name and a set of coordinates. They will give you a lot more information about that place. So how many gazetteers do we have for the classical world and for the ancient world in general? Well, we have so many. And this is just an illustrative slide. You will find a list of some of the most representative gazetteers in the link to this session. There are gazetteers that cover different things as well, and different research scenarios, depending on the granularity of the data, depending on what kinds of things they want to tackle. We have, for example, a gazetteer for time, periodo. We have gazetteers that actually cover a little bit of prosopography as well, such as Trismegistos. We have gazetteers that have a specific geographical coverage or linguistic coverage, such as the Syriac Gazetteer. Urban gazetteers are also a particular type of resource that focuses on places at a very small level of granularity. So buildings, city features, temples, and so on. We have also cultural heritage gazetteers, which are extremely focused on recording the status and the situation of cultural heritage resources and archaeological sites, and they especially cover areas that are at risk or endangered cultural heritage. So a couple of things more in terms of using gazetteers in linked open data, and then I'm going to go to the Recogito showcase and show you how to do that. As we said before, gazetteers provide URIs, which are essentially a way to connect resources together by accessing to a specific place entry within a resource. There are a couple of gazetteers that are structural to this effort. For example, the World Historical Gazetteer, which essentially uses URIs to link knowledge through all sorts of gazetteer. World Historical Gazetteers is almost a meta gazetteer, if you want. It uses linked open data to put together a lot of different resources about places that stem from different kinds of gazetteers. And then there's Wikidata, which is structural to a lot of efforts in digital classics right now, which probably a gazetteer is reductive for Wikidata. Wikidata aims at being an authoritative list, an authoritative multilingual resource about names of different entities in the ancient and pre-modern world. So Wikidata offers you the opportunity of using URIs, not just to refer to places, but also to refer to people, to ethnonyms, groups of people, without necessarily distinguishing between real world entities, for example, or literary imaginary entities, mythological entities, and so on. And it is particularly useful, I would say, for personal names as well. So what do we use gazetteers for? And can we show a little bit about the power of gazetteers? The first part of this sort of more demonstration-like session focuses on Recogito, which some of you may be already familiar with. So I'm just going to say a couple of words about what Recogito is as a tool and what kind of research it informs. Recogito is a semantic annotation environment that allows to perform the annotation of images or texts in a linked open data environment. It was created within the framework of the Pleiades project, or the Pleiades network, which is still a very, very active community. I should say there is also a Gazetteer activity in the Pleiades network that people can join if they're interested in learning more about gazetteers. Recogito was created to help scholars and students and just practitioners of the field to better and more efficiently associate their text or images with a spatial content to authoritative references, such as their entries in gazetteers, and in so doing, to help disambiguating those places to access further data, further information about them, and then eventually to conduct more research with them. So what Recogito does is it essentially enables you to perform annotation on a text or on an image, a map, and so on and so forth. This is commonly called semantic annotation. People may be familiar with the concept of scholarly annotation or informal annotation, which basically is, very traditionally reading a text, recognizing interesting strings, for example, place names, and just marking them up or tagging them within the text. What we do with semantic annotation is we actually go a step further, and we associate those elements, the entities, if you want, that we have marked up in the text with gazetteer URIs, which we mentioned at the beginning. And this enables us to do a few things, right? Because again, gazetteer URIs help us disambiguate places, they help us access additional information, they help us improve the metadata of our project, and so on and so forth. So the establishment of that link between our document, which is the target, and the URI in a gazetteer that represents that place, is precisely the work of our annotation. And this can be done manually, which is often the case, or it can be done semi-automatically with resources like named entity recognition and classification, and so on and so forth. That also largely depends on the text and on the languages that you're working on. So the effect of doing that is that while in a traditional form of annotation, I only have a generic reference to something that's named Sparta, but I don't necessarily know, even if it's a place, or I don't know its coordinates, I don't know its attestations, I don't know which Sparta we're talking about. By adding a gazetteer URI to that reference, we can actually know what Sparta that is. And in doing so, in linked open data scenarios, we can also, as I mentioned, access a lot more information. We can think about place type, which is provided by the vocabulary of certain gazetteers, representative locations, of course, connections and relations with other places or other things, alternative names, access to other mentions and other representative references across ancient and modern texts, bibliography, photographies, or even other cultural heritage resources, such as coin collections, cultural heritage archives, and so on and so forth, that have some reference to Sparta as a find spot, as a place mentioned in some objects on a coin, for example, as a place of provenance, as a place of preservation, and so on and so forth. So how do we access all of this magical world? In order to use Recogito, you will need an email, you will need to register for a profile, and then you will need to log in. After that, you can pretty much upload any sort of file that you like. Recogito particularly likes TXT files, so your file has to be readable, but you can also upload images using the IIIF manifest service. And you can also just upload your TIFF or JPG image if you want. You should make sure that you change the metadata, assigning a title, an author, if you can, a date and a language to your document. And you should also make sure that you select a license depending on where you are in terms of the copyright. And this will enable you also to share your document and the resulting annotations in different ways. Now, in order to access the Gazetteer services to annotate your places, in particular on Recogito, Recogito also offers you the opportunity to select across a range of different gazetteers. They mostly focus on the ancient world, but as you can see, there is a fairly good variety of things that you can access. You can use all of them, or you can just toggle a couple of them if you're just interested in specific temporally or geographically located resources. You can also use a specific tagging vocabulary if you're interested in getting access to a particular geographical or people vocabulary to better define them through the use of tags. You can upload your own custom tag set. So what do you do next? After you've uploaded your document, you will see that in the dashboard. And then Recogito is extremely easy to use and extremely intuitive, really. It enables you to simply select strings of interest, tag them, and then mark them according to their basic categorization. You can classify a string as a person, as you can see in this slide, as an event, if it's something a little bit longer and a little bit more complex, or as a place. Now, once you have tagged a specific portion of text as a place, and this is where I actually want to focus on, you also have the ability of accessing those gazetteers that we talked about before. Recogito, in fact, offers you a service that enables you to georeference those place names, that is, associate them with specific locations by means of gazetteer references. So once you have found your place, say Samos, in this particular slide, you can click on the little button that says search. And this is what you're going to see next. Recogito will try to find matching names to the specific string that you have annotated, or you can also refine the search by typing into the search bar. And it will offer you a series of possible gazetteer matches to verify whether you can actually identify that place by means of associating it with the appropriate entry in a gazetteer and the appropriate URI as a consequence. So in our case, for example, this is Samos and this is an ancient Greek text. So presumably we can make use of the Pleiades Gazetteer, which is indicated in blue in the little rectangle that you can see on top of the slide. So once you click on that and once you've done that, you have the ability of accessing all of that information, including the coordinates. So your annotation, once you go back to the text, will look a little different. It will show you the associated URI, it will show you the coordinates, like a rough map visualization of that place, and so on. Once you have done this a fair amount of time, you will be able to see the generated map through Recogito itself, because at this point, your data, especially the data about the places, is enriched by the additional information that you've been able to access through the gazetteer URI. And that includes coordinates, but also so much more. Place type, attestations, alternative names, time span, and so on and so forth. And you can do the same, of course, with images, right, with maps that have specific references to place. You can also play with it a little bit. You are not limited in terms of what you can do. You can have access to statistics about the tags that you use, the specific entities that you annotated. You can play around with the map and with the annotations and so on. But you can also export everything that you have created in different formats. Now, there's an exercise with which you can play that we have included at the end of this session that Valeria is going to present. And if you annotate a document in Recogito, you actually have the ability to download that document and play around with external programs, with external software that has a GIS component. So for instance, you can download a CSV, a tabular format version of your data set. You can download a GeoJSON file or a KML file even to play around with things like Google Earth and so on. And the process from there is actually very straightforward. We have also included a specific tutorial that you can read to discover how to do that more gradually. But if you basically have your specific data set in tabular format or KML format, you have the ability of uploading that on Google Maps, for example, and creating your own specific personal map. And you can, of course, play around with the colors, play around with the tags, change the names, add, use additional labels, add layers, and so on and so forth to visualize your data set or data sets in a more interactive way that maybe is more conducive to research. And you can, of course, do the same with Google Earth, which also gives you access to a few external resources that are provided by Google services. Actually, I was very excited to see that you can also create a map overlay by using the David Ramsey collection that Valeria is going to be talking about a little bit. And you can also, so you can see kind of a early modern map overlaid with your annotations and your places. You can also have access to a few GIS components, like figuring out itineraries and trying to visualize geographic material connections between places, and so on and so forth. But if you want to know more about this, and how to use GIS to make sense of your geographical data, actually our next Sunoikis session with Justin Colson and Rebecca Seafried is specifically about that. So make sure that you follow along with them and attend their session to learn more about how to use GIS and how to produce exciting research with mapped data. And at this point, my time is over, and I will leave the stage to Valeria, who is going to introduce the next important application of Gazetteers for our session.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chiara. I am going to share my screen in a moment. Can you see my screen?
Not yet, no, we can only see, we were seeing your Recogito. I think we're seeing it now, yeah.
Okay. Is it full screen or shall I go full screen?
No, it's just, we're seeing all your slides, not just the full screen.
Okay. Then view, full screen. Is it full screen now?
Almost. I mean, it's bigger, but we're still seeing the slides on the left.
Okay, so, well, I don't know how to make it more full screen than this, but...
That's fine. When it goes full screen, we'll be able to see it.
Okay.
Start talking.
Okay, so thank you, Chiara, and thank you all for joining us for this session on Gazetteers and applications of Gazetteers. So I'm gonna talk about a quite exciting, I hope, project I've been working on that won't immediately seem connected to Gazetteers, but bear with me. Gazetteers are actually a key component of this project. And there are, you will see at the end, there are actually several possible relationships with Gazetteer. So let's start talking a little bit about maps. If you have an interest in cultural heritage, chances are you are also interested in maps. And maps are definitely not just often very pretty to look at, but they're actually very rich and very important historical documents that actually have a lot of information about the cultures that produce them and the cultures that they try to represent. They are digitized at a very fast pace. There is an increasing number of digitized map collections in all major national libraries, for example, or specialized libraries. However, even though there is a growing interest in maps and there is a growing effort in digitizing these maps and even in making them more available, the way in which we look at these maps, the way in which we use them for research actually has not changed a lot. So what we do with maps now is what we used to do with maps before, which is basically looking at them one by one, sitting at our desk and either looking at the analog map or a digitized version on a screen, but still one by one. Now that we are thinking more and more often about computational applications of digital and digitized culture heritage, how can we actually leverage our computational power to do something more with maps? For example, what if we could not just search maps by looking at the metadata, but search maps by any word that appear on them, as if they were basically written pages of a book? And actually, there were some experiments in this regard, because it is a quite game-changing idea, the ability to search everything that is on a map. And some attempts have been made, for example, by projects like the Map of Early Modern London, which is a fantastic project that has transcribed and enriched an early modern map of the city of London, as well as GB 1900, which was a community project that produced manual transcriptions of the Ordnance Survey map series, which is a quite relevant for the history of the UK series of maps, and they transcribed it by hand. These are two projects that are definitely seminal projects. They have showed us what is the potential of being able to search map by words. But unfortunately, this approach of using volunteers in the case of GB 1900 or using students in the case of the Map of Early Modern London is too labor intensive, and in the long term is not sustainable. Also, we can only really apply it to a very few maps at a time. What we wanted to do was really scale things up, things bigger. Think of, okay, what if we could search collections and collections, thousands of maps by word? And that was pretty much the remit of a project I worked on, which was called Machines Reading Maps. It was an international collaboration, and Catherine McDonough was the PI in the UK, and Deborah Holmes-Wong, the PI in the United States. And the technical development was carried out by Yaoyi Chang and his students at University of Minnesota. And what this project produced is a pipeline that basically reads a map in inverted commas and outputs the text that is on the map. How does this work? Don't get scared. This is just a representation of the pipeline. You don't need to understand or remember necessarily all of this, but just in case people are curious, the image gets divided up in smaller patches, and then the algorithm processes these patches one by one and basically tries to understand A, if there is text, and B, what the text says. Then the patches are, let's say, stitched up again together. And then if there is, if the map has been georeferenced, so if there are, let's say, real world coordinates connected to the pixel, that information also gets processed. But I would like you to focus now, just keep it in the back of your mind, this process that is called M5, which is post-OCR and entity linker. So what happens at this stage of the pipeline is that the text that has been collected from the map is automatically associated with a knowledge base. In other words, it is automatically associated with something similar to a gazetteer. Like Chiara explained that you can do manually on Recogito, this pipeline tries to do automatically. And when we will have discussed a few of these things a little bit more, we will go back to how important it is to have the right knowledge base during this process. And I would also like to point at M6, which is the evaluation process step, which is based on a number of similar annotations that the machine is producing. This pipeline is called Map Curator. So the annotations that Map Curator has produced are then compared to similar annotations that have been produced by humans in particular by students at the University of Southern California, using Recogito. Actually using a special version of Recogito, a tailored version of Recogito that the same developer with Rainer Siemen has developed specifically for this project. You can recognize that the interface is very similar, although we have changed the categories and we added a few features, most notably the opportunity to link words together, and that is to help the algorithm understand, for example, when there are compound names, like, for example, a street name or something like that. So the project had some cultural heritage partners that were mostly national libraries. So we worked on the Ordnance Survey of Great Britain, as I mentioned before, and we'll go back to the Ordnance Survey because it was an extraordinary case study. So we collaborated with the National Library of Scotland and the British Library. We also worked with the Sanborn Fire Insurance maps in collaboration with the Library of Congress. And last, we had this rather unexpected opportunity that we were very excited about and very grateful for, to work on the David Ramsay historical map collection. Now, if you're not familiar with it, I strongly recommend that you visit it. It is also part of the exercise and what I'm going to show you. But if you don't know it, is a very large and heterogeneous, like many private collections, collection of digitized maps that are completely available for the public, and they are very, very well and detailed cataloged. And what we did was processing about 60,000 of maps from this collection, and we chose specifically those that have been geo-referenced. So we had information about, let's say, if there was a word on the map, we also knew more or less where those what were the coordinates that were associated with those words. So thanks to this collaboration between Machines Reading Maps and the David Ramsay map collection, it is now available, a function that enables you or anyone to search the collection by word. What does that mean? And I'm very happy to show you. So there are several reasons why I think that this was a very it was really a step forward in the way that we use map collection, in the way that we think of map collections as a source for historical research. I think that this new approach to map is really going to change something in our relationships with digitized maps. And the first reason why I think this is a game changer is the discovery aspect of it. And that means that through these things, we're going to find more maps. And I think that we can all agree that more maps are always a good thing. But now I'm going to leave my slides and move straight to the David Ramsay website. Gabby, can you confirm that you're seeing my screen in full screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the David Ramsay map collection. And let's see what happens normally when you search for, let's say, a relatively major place if you're interested in cartography. For example, this is, I have pre-searched some things because I didn't want to use all the time waiting for the search results. So let's say that we are in the David Ramsay map collection and we search for a fairly, major city, if you're into historical cartography, which is the city of Naples in Italy. So what do we get? We get a fair amount of results, actually. We can see that we have 843 results. That's not bad at all. So what are we seeing here? We're seeing all hits for the word Naples anywhere in the metadata. Now, you must now be familiar with the concept of metadata, which are the data that describe a digital object, in our case, a map. So that means that the word Naples, in the results that we're getting here, in these 843 results that we're getting here, must have the word Naples in the title, maybe as a place of publication, or maybe in the description field. So we see here on the left, these are the main metadata in the Ramsey collection. There were so many that they have been actually grouped for convenience into what, where, who, and when. But there are several fields in those metadata. In one of those fields, the word Naples must have appeared. So we have quite a few results. That's very satisfying. We are happy with that. Now, let's change scenario. Let's imagine that we're looking for a place that is not as prevalent. For example, my hometown, which is the city of Taranto in Italy, which is definitely less often mentioned in historical cartography, and I get 18 results. Boo. Actually, that's still a lot of results. I don't often see that many results for the city of Taranto, but it's definitely not as satisfying as searching for Naples. Now, what I'm seeing here again are maps in which the word Taranto, which is the place name that we're looking for, appears somewhere in the metadata. And this is the reason why I am mostly seeing maps of Taranto. So, for example, this amazing map of Piri Reis that shows the city. Now, let's say that instead of looking for the maps where the word Taranto appears in the metadata, I want to look for all the times that the place name just appears on a map. How do I do that? Well, simply, I change my search from a search in catalog data to a search in text on maps. I do that, and then I click search. And if everything works, no, wait, that's the view that we want. And this is what happens. So what the system is doing is showing me all the time that this word appears on a map. And you can see that we have quite a few more results than 18. We actually have 1,095. So if I were interested in finding maps that feature that place for whatever reason, now the amount of results that I have found has definitely increased. As much as we are all happy about having more data, it is maybe not simply about having more data, but also about what are we finding? What are the new things that we may or may not be discovering right now? And to show you that, I may actually, no, perhaps I don't need to do that. So for example, this kind of search has a slightly, has a little level of fuzziness embedded. So for example, I can find, little variations of the place name that may be, for example, the French version of the name. That means that, again, I am finding more than just the precise match of it. But also, if I move to the second view that has been developed, by the way, that amazing visualization that you just saw, and I think it's one of the most brilliant data visualization I've ever seen, was developed by the Luna team that worked already with the David Ramsey collection, and that is called a Masonry view. While this is a thumbnail view that shows us all the maps, and there is a tiny pin that also shows us where the annotation is, so where the name that has been mentioned is. And, thinking about the things that you may discover through this process, is, for example, in what kind of maps you can find your hometown. And maybe I was not expecting of, finding my hometown appearing in, I don't know, a map of North Africa or a map of Turkey, or, let's say less expected context. And that, I think, helps us to remember that, what gets included and excluded in a map is always a matter of choice. It's always a matter of making a cultural statement. But maybe now that we have found, so many results, we may actually get a little bit lost. And we may say, okay, yes, we like the idea that we have so many more, but we also miss that kind of precision that searching through the metadata also gives us. And the good news is that we can actually combine the two kinds of searches. So, for example, let's go back to Naples, and actually let's do this experiment that instead of searching Naples in the metadata, we search for Naples in text on maps and see what we get. This may take a little because it's going to be a lot of maps. Okay, we are 2,200 and something. So if we scroll through this visualization, that is also great because it gives us a little contextualization of where, in what kind of map the pin is. So if it is a small scale, if it is a large scale, sometimes it's not even, on the map. Sometimes, the place is mentioned outside of the map because maybe it's the place of publication or something like that. And what I see here are, a lot of maps of Italy, but then, hey, this doesn't look like Italy to me. And that is because, well, there are a handful of Naples in the world. So let's say that I only want to see the maps that have the word Naples, but that are limited to, let's say, the United States. So to do that, I go to Advanced Search, and here are back all our beloved metadata fields. And now we can actually really leverage the metadata fields to filter our research. So, for example, we can say that we're only interested in one country, that is United States, and that we search in all text of maps the word Naples. And then we click search. And if I have not made any mistake, what we should get in return are, tada, all the maps that have the word Naples, but that have as country set in the metadata United States. I don't think we have time to show you that, but I also tried to look for Napoli with Italian spelling in the United States. There is only one. And if you're curious, you can search for it and discover where it is. Okay, I want to show you one last thing about searching place names. And no, actually, I will talk about something else first, which is the fact that one of the reasons why maps are such an interesting cultural object is that very often, in the majority of cases, actually, maps do not feature only place names. When we think of text on maps, of course, we mostly think of place names. I've worked with Gazetteers. I am very much drawn to place names, but there is much more than place names on maps. And having this kind of tool enables us to actually spot and isolate and in a way analyze more critically other kind of words that may, for example, that may help us surface some kind of narratives. And I was looking for the word discovery, and I will explain to you why if I speed this up a little bit. And what I realized is that looking for the word discovery, what I found were mostly maps that had a very, very strong colonial connotation. And that was very clear in the imagery as well. You will find in the slide at least one example of what I mean by that. Another kind of search that we could do, another kind of search that we could do is search by types of place. So for example, we could search for the word school. And that is, again, a completely different way to think of searching maps, because we are used to search for places on maps, but actually there are a lot of generic names on maps as well that are featured and that actually carry a lot of historical and cultural potential for further analysis. And now, if you remember, I promised that we would go back to searching gazetteers. Now, as Chiara has explained, when we link a place name or any feature, any geographical feature with a gazetteer, we are not only disambiguating it, but we are also sort of creating a free way for the information that is in the gazetteer to be downloaded, harvested, and connected to our document, in our case, a map. So, for example, I could also harvest from the gazetteer information about the type of a place. So if that information was connected automatically to a map, we could also perform semantic searches and not simply, let's say, word searches. So, for example, we could say, okay, we want to see all the words that are names of mountains without necessarily having the word mountains in it. And to reach, to get to these goals, we definitely need to use gazetteers, but we need to use the right ones. And why I'm saying that we need to use the right ones. I'll give you another example that will also take us to part of our exercise. And here we are looking at the results for the word Benghazi. So Benghazi is a place in Libya, and as many places in Arabic-speaking countries, in the process of transliterating them for Western cartographers or archaeologists or, again, inverted commas, explorers, the ways in which the place names have been transliterated is really, really inconsistent. And the fact that we have so many place variations, it is sometimes a barrier in finding all the references and connecting all the documents, all the archaeological findings, all the diaries, all the notebooks, all the grey literature that refer to these places. So we could actually creatively leverage a little bit of fuzziness that is in this search, as I was saying before. So, for example, if I search for Benghazi with this spelling that you can see in the search field, you can notice that we actually also find already some slight variation. Look, for example, at this one that has Benghazi with a final Y. Now, if you work with Gazetteer, you can already get excited because you have found one new variant. I know there is somewhere also a variant that has a circumflex accent on the A. But okay, so far we found, one unexpected variation, but we want to get more excited. How do we do that? Well, actually, we could hack the search box a little bit and add a 1-character distance. So what we're telling this system is to search not just for perfect matches of the spelling Benghazi with, GH and ZI, and, maybe some slight variation. No, we're taking it a little bit further, and we're saying that we are interested in all the version of this word that have up to one character different. And if we had 222 results here, let's see how many do we get. Okay, we have doubled the number of results, and I can tell you that here we also have, well, a lot of variation. We have the S instead of the Z, we have with the H without the H, we have Benghazi, we have Benghazi, we have Benghazi, and all of these variations, if we work on historical names, if we work on linguistic evolution, if we work with sociolinguistics, if we work with the political history of a place, these are all interesting variations for us. And one of the main roles of gazetteers is actually recording all of these variations and preserving them before they get lost in a sort of homogenizing process. So, for example, if we go to the Heritage Gazetteer of Libya, which is one of the many historical gazetteers like those that Chiara mentioned, that does list variations for Benghazi. We can definitely see that there are some missing. We don't have Benghazi with the final Y, and we don't have Benghazi with the J, with the G, that I have also spotted on an Ottoman map, and I'm definitely gonna add them at the end. We will come back to this as an exercise. I see that I am definitely running behind, so let me think of what is that I absolutely need to tell you before the end of the class. All the things that I have not covered are you will find in the slide. Okay, I just want, Gabby, do I have 5 minutes to talk about using this for research?
4.
Okay.
No, 5 is fine.
Okay, so I just want to give you one example of creative ways in which we can use this tool to perform research. Finding variations of place names is definitely very interesting, but it is not the only thing that we can do. As I said, we can look for narratives, but sometimes being able to find particular words is exactly what we need for our research. And I want to give you an example from my own research, just to maybe to give you some ideas of other experiments that you can do. So what I'm working on at the moment is the way in which the Ordnance Survey maps, with this series that I mentioned before, represent antiquities. And they use a very, very peculiar system in which antiquities are marked on the map. That is not a specialist map, it's a general public map, by using different fonts. So they are using visual, let's say, signals, a visual code to mark the antiquities and to make them stand out. In even more specifically, they use a different font for each of these 3 main time periods they have identified. So they are very, very easily spotted on the map. And well, I am just quite fascinated by this and the words that were associated with this dedicated font. So there are some keywords that recur, such as supposed site, ruins, remains, repeated site, and things like that. Now, when thinking about this and writing about this before I dive too deep into how let's say, how interesting and how efficient was this approach used by the cartographers and the surveyors in the ordnance survey maps. My colleague and I, we wondered, is this a unique thing? Is this something that only the ordnance survey did, or was it something that at the time actually other cartographers, other were using similar codes? So was it a trend, or was it something that was definitely unique? Now, usually the way to find an answer for this would be to go to a lot of libraries and sample randomly other map series from around the same time, and just do the old-fashioned research, which is obviously fantastic and very valuable, but it really takes a lot of time. Or we thought, okay, why don't we actually give it a go on the Ramsey collection, which of course is not all maps in history, it's not all maps in the world, it is one single collection, but it is a large one, and it is a very heterogeneous one. So we thought, okay, let's use this. And what we did was searching through the search by word function for some of these keywords. This is how I stumbled upon Discovery, and I found out that it usually led not to archaeological maps, but to very, very colonial propaganda. And so we had the best luck with the word ruin. So we looked for the word ruin on other maps, and we found very interesting maps. And we can definitely say that there were quite a lot of maps that were representing antiquities and historical sites. But so far, we have not found any other example of a map series that uses a dedicated font for that. And as I said, this is just a small number of maps. I mean, 60,000 sounds a lot, but compared to all maps in the world, it's definitely just a small sample. But it gives us a starting point. It gives us a direction. And I think this is the way in which scholars could use this tool. Of course, not all answers about the history of cartography are in the David Ramsey collection, but it is, I think, a very, very useful way to test hypotheses and to see what kind of information you can get. And sometimes to just, explore sort of, playfully to see what you can get. You can actually also correct the annotation in the Ramsey collection. I'll let you discover that by yourselves. I just want to finish with a remark about gazetteers. So why gazetteers are so important in this process? Well, I told you that what the algorithm does is trying to disambiguate the results that of the text spotting, which are sometimes incomplete or incorrect. So what the algorithm does is trying to, let's say, regularize them against a knowledge base, which in principle, it's a great idea because that helps us reducing the error. However, variety in place names is not always an error. So those, all of those variations, the transliteration of Benghazi are actually relevant to me, are relevant to scholars of, Libyan geography, Libyan history, and so on. So it is actually quite important that these automated processes are done with the right tools and with tools that are tailored to the specific time period, the specific cultural context. So it is very important that we create the right gazetteers that are rich in variants, so that we can use them as reliable authority lists that are rich in relevant semantic information that do not tell us, like OpenStreetMap, which is what was used with the David Ramsey collection. It doesn't tell us how far it is from a gas station, because I don't care about that for an historical gazetteer, but maybe gives us other kind of information. On the other hand, we can definitely use these workflow to create gazetteers, or at least to enrich gazetteers, because each of the place names that we find, each of the variations that we find as an attestation, we can say definitely this thing appears on an historical artifact, which is this map that was published in this year and can be found at this link. So there is potentially a great interaction, a great collaboration between this project and the production and the application of historical gazetteer. And we are already in conversation with the World Historical Gazetteer, and I hope that, you know, the next Sunoikis class, I will be able to tell you more about that. And with this, I think I should conclude about searching maps by words and tell you instead something about the exercise. So I'm going to switch to our page. So one quick thing, well, you will find the required readings and quite a few further readings as well. As Chiara said, there are quite a few gazetteers that we have also listed for you if you're curious to look at the differences, to discover what they do, to see how they structure the information, if you can export the information, and so on. If you got excited by Recogito, as many people do, it's a fantastic tool. We have covered Recogito before, Chiara and myself, more than once. There are other resources available, I mean, other tutorials available for Recogito, both in video formats and in, you know, text format. So if you want to explore more the features of Recogito, you can find really all the information that you're looking for. So for the exercise, we have given you a little bit, I think I'm looking at an older version. Okay. We have given you a bit of choice for the exercise. Feel free to do only one.
Could you zoom in on the text a little bit, Valeria? We can't see it on the screen.
Yes, sorry. Is this a little bit better? Okay.
Lovely, yeah, thank you.
Feel free to complete one, all of them, only a couple, whatever combination you like. So we have thought of suggesting a very good tutorial that is published on the Programming Historian that is about creating simple web maps. I mean, not necessarily super simple, but also, it's definitely a tutorial that one can follow without any issues. And this would be also, I think, a good step towards a little bit more advanced GIS approach to mapping that you're going to do with Justin and Becky next week. So to complete that tutorial, you need some data. And we thought that the best way for you to create some of the data would be to use Recogito and to annotate a document with Recogito. Once you have performed some annotation on Recogito, you can actually download your annotations in CSV, and you can use that CSV directly in Google Maps, for example. Now, just quickly to show you, this is how a CSV downloaded from Recogito looks like. So you see that just linking to the Gazetteer, you have not manually entered any of this information, but this information will be in your spreadsheet. So most of the places that have a connection to the Gazetteer will have coordinates, so they can be visualized in Google Maps or Google Earth. So this is how your CSV looks like. I actually would recommend that before you use Google Maps, you get rid of, you see that there is a column that says type. I would suggest that you get rid of all annotations that are not places. I think in this case, they're all places. But if you create some person or event annotation, just get rid of them before you use Google Maps. Of course, places that don't have coordinates will not have a pin in Google Maps. However, you can add the coordinates manually. So the place that you have annotated may not have a gazetteer entry necessarily, but you may know where that is and you want to put it on the map. So you can, in Google Maps, you can actually edit the spreadsheet inside Google Maps. And if you want, you can add the coordinates manually. You can see that in some cases, there are also types associated with the settlement. All of this information comes from the gazetteer. You can then in Google Maps choose to perform visualization by place type, for example. While here, this column is the column tags, and these are other kind of information that you can attach yourself in your annotation. And again, you could use that for your visualization in Google Maps as well. There is a link to the tutorial for Recogito in case you need it. And third, if you have the time and if you are now curious to experiment with the search by word feature in the David Ramsey map collection, well, just try different searches. Actually, I would personally be very, very interested in knowing what you would like to search for. If you want to try and discover new variants for place names that are originally maybe in an alphabet different from Latin, so maybe Greek places, Arabic places. If you speak other languages that are not written in Latin character, that would be great. And maybe think of a relevant gazetteer that might feature some of these places. And if you find even one new variant, I'm not sure I can convey how exciting that could be for someone who works with gazetteers. Some of these gazetteers are collaborative projects, and they would happily give you an account and enable you to make edits. Others don't. So maybe if you want the results of your work to be published and to benefit the rest of the community, maybe try in some ways to get in touch with the editors if they're listed. If there is an email, just say, hey, I found this variant place name in this map. If you by any chance want to experiment with the Heritage Gazetteer of Libya, feel free to send your newfound variant names to me directly. Chiara, do you think I have covered everything? Do you want to add anything else?
I think that's all.
Okay, cool. Then I think we're done with the exercise. I don't know if, yeah, we're ready for discussion or anything else.
I have a question, Valeria, about the exercise.
Yeah.
If you discover a variant place name, is the information that you can get about the map in the Ramsey website sufficient to tell the gazetteer where this place name was attested?
I would think so, because that may not be true for all gazetteers in the world, but I am fairly confident that most historical gazetteers basically work on an attestation-based model. So as long it's not necessarily important to say it was used, in this area. What is important to say is there is a source that, as an identifier and as, publication date and everything that features this variant. And then it's sort of a proxy for, then maybe an historian or someone to say, okay, if it appears in that publication, then maybe I can make hypotheses on where and when and to what extent it was used. But I think that for the purpose of the gazetteer, the important thing is to say it has a philological attestation in this specific document.
I guess what I'm asking is what, in an ideal world, what would you like them to send you? If they send you, say, oh, here's an odd spelling of Benghazi that I found, and here's a link to the map I found it on, then you've got to check and dig out the thing. But if they can send you,
oh yeah, well, I mean, if
the
they
normal
could say,
citation of that map, how
yeah,
you decide what the map's called, that would save you time.
yeah, that would be even better. I mean, you know, that would be less work for whoever, you know, will have to add this information. So if you could say, okay, this is the title of the map, this is, you know, date of publication and place of publication, maybe all information that is in the David Ramsey collection, which is very, very detailedly cataloged.
So the way you would normally cite that map in a bibliography, in other words.
Yeah.
There's another question. Liz in Zurich asked a couple of questions while you were presenting the Ramsey search feature. One of them I was able to answer. The other I thought I'd leave to you, which is that she saw you could filter maps by date, for example. Can you do this by century?
Yes, you can select a date span, a time span of interest. I didn't show that, you know, in the interest of time, but basically you can filter the maps by any of the fields in the metadata. So if something appears in the metadata, you can filter in the advanced search by that. In particular, by date, which is obviously a very interesting piece of information. You can say, you know, from this date to this date, all of the maps that match the criteria.
So I guess by century, you just say 1801 to 1900.
Yes, yeah.
Century or whatever, yeah. Cool.
You're welcome.
While we're waiting for other questions, or questions from within the call as well, we can ask each other questions. Just a reminder to my students, who are not the only people watching this, but those who are my students, where we've said here's a suggested exercise, and if you would like to, obviously for you none of those niceties apply. The exercise is obligatory, and you should definitely work through parts. You know, part one to get a sense of how you make a map in Google Maps, and that you should experiment with the other two parts as a way of creating data that you can use with that. But I think for most people it would be useful to really not just think of this as three separate exercises, but as a range of activities which taken together make each other more valuable.
Yeah, and as we said, gazetteers are sort of the common denominator between all of different exercises. This is to say that you can do many different things, and you can sort of problematize your approach to the sources in many different ways by simply accessing the information that gazetteers have and trying to associate the information in a source with like the official authoritative record that is in a gazetteer, in an index, in Wikidata, you name it.
I suppose a question that some people might have if they're wanting to try out part two of the exercise is, we've sort of blithely said upload a text file which has lots of place names in. Some people their first thought might be, where do I get such a text file with lots of place names in? Any suggestions? I mean, obviously, you know, we're all grown-ups. They should pull up the socks and figure it out. But so suggestions as a starting place.
Yes. Valeria, do you want to?
Well, I mean, you're the classicist. One text that we have used often is the Peloponnesian War. I mean, you can try the Iliad if you if people are so inclined. Actually, I think there are suggestions of types of text in the description of the exercises. I mean, even things as itineraries or pilgrimages or accounts of travel. Maybe if you're more into the reception side of the study of classics. So things like, what were the antiquities, the people who visit, during the Grand Tour or things like that.
Yes. Also, I mean, there are so many things that you can do. If you really just want to tag place after place after place after place after place, you can do an itinerary, such as the Antonine itinerary or the Vicarello goblets, even whatever you like in that sense. And in the session outline under other resources, we have also linked to sessions that are focused on geographical annotation. Some of them are about Recogito, and in those exercises, there are also useful references to texts that you can use or texts that you can find. We may even add a couple right here in our session as well, if people feel like they need that sort of indication. And as far as where do you find the TXT version of those things, of course, I mean, Wikipedia and Wikisource are your friends, but you can download the TXT version of a classical text or a late text from the Scaife reader, which is sort of Perseus 2.0. Maybe we can add a comment in the chat to that effect. And you can use the digital classic library, the digital Latin library. If you have a TLG subscription, of course, just make sure that you're fine in terms of copyright and the like. And there are plenty of resources if you would like to work with Greco-Roman civilization. A little less so, of course, if you would like to work with other things. But you can access databases on Akkadian, Coptic, online, and so on and so forth. And if you followed Sunaikisis for a little while at this point, you probably are also a little bit familiar with some of these resources.
I mean, you can also just save as or export a text file in TXT if you have it in another format. Yeah,
you can copy paste it even. Just make sure that there are no blatant mistakes before you upload it.
And maybe another thing about the exercise, I hope this is not getting too much, but I think that the interesting aspect of annotating a text with Recogito is not simply, spotting the places, because I mean, probably there is already a map of, all the places in the Antonine itinerary and so on. So we're not asking you to do that, because that would be, it will teach you to use a tool, but it would be a little bit of a sterile exercise in a way. What I would say is maybe try to think of what would you like your visualization of this place on a map to show. So for example, do these places belong to different categories? So maybe after identifying, the places and finding them in the Gazetteers, through the tags, you define their categories and, you apply a different color, and then, your map is saying something. It's saying about the differences between these places that were on the same itinerary or that were mentioned in the same book. And if they are, places in a book, maybe you can make a difference between, I don't know, it's usually worse. So I don't know, places of victory and places of defeat, or I don't know, places that, were mentioned against places that were actually visited. So you can distinguish between the more narrative imaginary geography and the more factual accounts, or anything that interests you. What I'm saying is try to use the annotation process as a way to say something about the text that you're annotating.
And of course, if you really, really want to go nuts, you can annotate relationships between different entities. I won't even say anything more, because I think you should try to understand what that really means.
Yeah, if you look at the tutorial that Valeria pointed to, there'll be a reference to that as well. Liz asks, suggested parameters for numbers of places that it's useful to have annotated?
It very much depends on what, again, as Valeria was saying, it very much depends on what your research question is, so to speak. There may be a minimal number of annotations that would enable you to say something, or there may be the need for a slightly larger number of annotations. For example, in texts that have more of an itinerary-like structure, it could be advisable to maybe annotate one section to have a full sense of where the itinerary starts, how it proceeds, and where it stops. Or again, to have a full understanding of the types of places and the categories of things that are described. But it very much depends on what you are interested in, because there are texts that are a lot more complex and a lot more problematic to annotate and to associate with authority lists. If you are interested in people, for example, not so much about geography, but people, associating people and personal names with authority lists is a real challenge, beyond, you know, the usual suspects like Achilles, Thetis, Homer, Augustus, and whatever. But there are objectively personal names that we don't know a lot about and that are not necessarily identified. So some things take time, and you want to be mindful of that as well. I would say, as Valeria was saying as well, the very important thing is that you figure out what you want to do with your annotations. What is it that you want to discover from your text, and how can annotation help you make sense of it?
I guess another way of looking at this is it just for the exercise in terms of learning to do this. You've seen that there's the map visualization view within Recogito. Is keep annotating places until your map becomes interesting. Now, once you've annotated 5 places, you've got 5 dots on the map that don't really tell you anything. Once you've annotated a couple of dozen places, and some of them are the same place multiple times, then you start to have patterns on the map, and then you're learning something from it. That's sort of the goal of the exercise. Obviously, if you were designing your own project, in the longer term, everything that Chiara's just been saying would become important considerations additional to that.
And of course, unless your professor has a specific number of annotations that you would like, that they would like you to produce.
This is Professor Dunn. Any other questions or thoughts from in the house or outside the house? If not, then thank you both very much indeed, Valeria and Chiara. This has been a really exciting session. I look forward to hearing about various things that people have done with the exercises, and I hope all of you will join us next week for a follow-on session on a different aspect of geographic technologies with GIS. So a specific technology for making and analysing map information. So, thank you very much. See you next week.
Thank you.